So, is Donald Trump using tariffs, trade taxes, as a political weapon, using the sanctions to dictate other countries' domestic and foreign policies? He's now threatened Canada over its plans to recognise the state of Palestine, and he's used tariffs on Brazil to push for the prosecution of former President Bolsonaro to be dropped. So, are tariffs really about the domestic economy and the foreign policies of other countries? Harry Broadman is a former US Assistant Trade Representative, as well as Chief of Staff of the President's Council of Economic Advisors. That was under President George H. Bush and Bill Clinton. Hello to you, Harry. Welcome to the programme.
Hello, John. Nice to see you.
It's good to have you here. So these latest moves by President Trump threatening Canada and sanctioning the Palestinian Authority, first of all, these are obviously big moves on a big story. Just your thoughts on that. He's digging in on the side of Benjamin Netanyahu, who I guess, to him, it's a friend in need.
Yeah, I mean, it's as you said at the very top about using tariffs for foreign policy or domestic policy, in other words, not economic policy or international economic policy, is quite strange. But of course, we've seen this before with Mr. Trump, and I think it's going to undermine his legal case for the tariffs that he has put in place, which is a U.S. law on international economic emergencies, and the notion that economic is in that title of that law is very deliberate. So I think this is going to be a big issue. That, as you probably know, that is being challenged now in federal court, and that case will be heard quite soon, I think.
Right, and what does the law say about this, Harry? Because we're looking here at the use of tariffs to put pressure on a government when it comes to that government's purely domestic policy. We're talking about the prosecution of Jair Bolsonaro, who we know is someone that Trump admires, and Bolsonaro admired Trump. But it's a domestic matter for Brazil. To use tariffs in this way, it is not what tariffs were conceived as being used for, nor one imagines to pressure Canada over its foreign policy. So does the law mean this is open to being overturned in some way in the federal courts?
No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, as I say, the name of the law is International Emergency Economic Act. This is not an international issue. It's a domestic issue within another country. It's not economic, clearly, and it's not an emergency. I think Mr. Trump has already, stacked against him this case, even what he's doing on pure trade matters. But I think, stepping into this new realm of trying to use an international economic instrument in another country is going to create far more problems for him legally at the federal level now than I think he thought in the beginning.
Yeah, look, the president is coming into office for the second time. He did it in the first term, but he's doing it so much more in the second term, using executive presidential orders to achieve these ends. What are the constraints, Harry, on a president using orders of that kind? How free is he to act outside the normal constraints?
Well, I mean, within certain guidelines, presidents are able to do that. But I think in this particular case, he's beyond those boundaries. But his view, I think, his political calculus is that he has control of the Senate. He's got control of the House of Representatives in our country. And ultimately, those are the bodies who make these laws. Right now we're in the court discussing whether or not the incumbent law applies to what Mr. Trump is trying to do. What he could well do, I think would be a heroic effort, is try to amend that law, the underlying law. That's going to take some time, obviously, but maybe not, because Mr. Trump, as we have seen, really does seem to control the votes in the legislative branch. And once you change that statute to his liking for the sake of argument, and it could be done relatively quickly, then the courts will say, well, and then Mr. Trump issues the new tariffs under that amended law. Then the court says, well, he's followed the new law.
I suppose it is imaginable that there could be pressure from Congress. Of course, it's open to the federal courts to overturn the use of tariffs in this way. But of course, the Congress could just seek to take back its historic authority over tariffs. So far, they are ready to follow in the president's footsteps, and they're doing pretty much tamely what President Trump wants them to do. But as you get closer to the midterm elections, if the tariffs are working to the disadvantage of the American people, you have to wonder, we can only speculate, Harry, that Congress might start shifting in its opinions.
I think that's right. And I think that, trade mostly to Americans is still a distant, issue. They don't really understand how it affects their pocketbook. But now, given the uncertainty in the international economy by dint of Mr. Trump's moves, and how that is impacting the domestic economy, let alone the global economy, you will see tightening of the U.S. economy, jobs, inflation, and the like. As we've seen, those reverberate rather quickly, right? Whether that translates into different votes in the legislative branch, who Mr. Trump really does, his party controls, I think is another matter. So he's playing a high stakes game, large risks, but also large rewards. And I think he's trying to mitigate those risks and just trying to reap those rewards. It's uncharted territory, I'll put it that way.
Well, now just lastly, just in the last half hour, President Trump has posted on Truth Social, he's saying that Mexico has got another 90 days to make a trade deal. For now, he's sticking with a 25% tariff. Now, that is a trade deal that matters in the streets and in the shops of America. What do you make of that news?
Well, two things. One, he keeps moving the deadlines, right? Which is a bad game. It's a bad way of negotiating. But you're quite right. Between Canada and Mexico are northern and southern neighbors. The last sort of constituencies you'd want to alienate. He's doing a very good job at that. But coming from New York and the kind of mafioso, mentality he has, this is the way he's throwing punches left and right, and he wants to see which will swing through. And he's clearly looking on the bulletin board about what he's done. Well, he said, I've been able to do this with this country and this country. Well, then the Canadians and Mexicans, why not with them too? Yeah. But I think that's a really high stakes game, because all three of our economies are integrated. And let me just note that the USMCA, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, is something that he actually wanted and negotiated to replace the previous Canadian U.S.-Canada free trade agreement. So I think when people think about this as legislatures, as consumers and business investors, everybody's on tenterhooks, and that cannot be good domestically from the economic perspective, which will translate into political instability for him. But he also says, well, this is my second term. I'm sure he'd like to run for a third time and trying to change the law for that. But this will reverberate negatively for him. Whether he cares about how he looks in the history books is another matter. But I think he's really doesn't know how to sort of calm things down and proceed.
Okay, Harry, really great to have you on. Harry Broadman there, who's a former U.S. Assistant Trade Representative for the Presidents H. Bush and Bill Clinton.